So it's this constant listening to what is it that clients want, both implicitly and explicitly, is what drives our needs. And on the associate teammate side, is the same thing. We're constantly listening to them, we're surveying, we're asking questions, we're walking a mile in their shoes.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Hari Gopalkrishnan. Hari is the Chief Technology and Information Officer of Bank of America and is a member of the company's executive management team. Bank of America is the second largest bank in the United States by total assets, with approximately $2.6 trillion in consolidated assets. The company also reported $192 billion in revenue in 2024. Hari leads a global organization responsible for designing and delivering technology solutions for all 8 lines of business, staff support groups, global information security, and technology infrastructure. His team has helped drive remarkable innovation at the bank that has led to more than 7,800 patents filed, 59 million digital users, and global teams focused on cybersecurity, operational resilience, data and analytics tools, and workforce enablement. Artificial intelligence platforms and innovations are embedded across the company, and I'm sure that's going to be a big part of what we talk about through this conversation as well. Hari took on his current role earlier in 2025, but joined the bank in 2011. I look forward to learning more about all of the above and more through this conversation. Hari, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
I am as well. Yeah, I'm grateful you would take this time. Let's begin with Bank of America. I mean, a very prominent bank, a very prominent brand on top of that. I would imagine almost everyone who is listening or watching this would have some awareness as to the business you're in. But fill in a few blanks in brief, if you would, as to the business Bank of America is in.
Essentially, what we do is serve customers across a wide financial spectrum. So if you look at one end of the spectrum, you have our retail clients. And retail clients are typically people like me and you who open a checking account, start their careers, and put $50, $100, $500, and overall, over time, build their accounts. The second client base we have is called the preferred client, which is where you start to gather some money, you want to invest in the market, you're more mass affluent, and you start to look for a house and do those things. As you move up the spectrum, you get into wealth management, where we offer you with varying sets of wealth management services to help you plan from, how do you want to deal with intergenerational wealth, trusts, estate planning, a whole bunch of stuff that comes along with it. And shifting further along, we support businesses, and the businesses could be a small business that just opened down the street. Over time, it becomes a franchise. Over time, it becomes a mid-sized business. And over time, it could become a big global commercial bank. And so we cover an entire spectrum of businesses across our business banking and global commercial banking spectrum. And finally, last but not the least, we have our global markets business, which is all about being in the capital markets, trading investments across pretty much every major market across the globe. So whole gamut of things. We say our job is to try to make our clients' financial lives better with every single transaction they have with us. And we try to do that across that entire spectrum of products and services.
Good to learn more about the breadth associated with the remarkable scale that I referenced in the introduction as well. Talk a bit about your role as Chief Technology and Information Officer, if you would. What's within your purview?
We work with all those lines of businesses, and my team works with all those lines of businesses to understand, anticipate customer demand, client demand for technology, actually for solutions of which technology is a part of it. And then we work with them to define those requirements and then go to market with an increasingly large set of capabilities. So whether it be things like online banking and mobile and payments that we all use day in, day out, or it could be trading systems in capital markets. It could be customer relationship management systems in commercial banking. It could be payment systems in Asia. Essentially, if a client needs technology, my team's responsible for providing it across those 8 lines of businesses.
You have, getting back to scale, you have a $13 billion technology budget, and I believe it's about $4 billion of that's set aside for new technology, which includes artificial intelligence. We'll get into AI in a moment, but you've noted to me in our past conversations that you focus first and foremost on thinking about how to leverage technology innovation to positively impact both employee and customer experience. And I wonder if you could take a moment to talk a bit about how you engage each of those constituent groups to identify the best way to do so.
Yeah, it's a great question, Peter, because we never pick up the problem with what's the shiny tchotchke in our hand and how do we go use it in a way that's technically cool thing to do. It's not like we don't know how to use cool things. It's just that it isn't as compelling for us. So we start the problem with what's the explicit or implicit customer need. The explicit need often we find through listening to customers. We look at every 2 weeks, we send a survey to our customers asking how they feel about our services. They give us feedback. We have page level feedback in our sites. We listen to call centers. We listen to what call center our clients tell us at the call center. So we're looking at lots of feedback that our clients tell us every single day. The other thing we also do is we look at implicit behaviors where we see customers doing things and we go like, why would a customer ever call a call center when they could have done this themselves on their mobile app? Now, they never tell us that that's why they're calling, but we ask ourselves some questions along those lines. And when you ask those questions, what comes out is a set of interesting ideas that you wonder, hey, what if we could build something that actually could do these three things for a client? Would that give them more empowerment so they could take care of things themselves? What if they could actually find this piece of content easier on the mobile app? Would that mean they don't have to take their valuable time to call the call center? So it's this constant listening to what is it that clients want, both implicitly and explicitly, is what drives our needs. And on the associate teammate side is the same thing. We're constantly listening to them, we're surveying, we're asking questions, we're walking a mile in their shoes. We go have tech teams go in the call center, sit with them, listen to calls, hear what clients are telling us, hear how many clicks an associate's making on their desktop. In fact, when we get to AI, we'll talk about a couple of examples of where it's all about minimizing the toil our associate is facing when they're actually trying to serve a client. And you know that best because you sit next to the associate, you feel their pain, you hear what they have to go through, and you go, hey, I can do better for you. And then out come the requirements coming out of it.
Your AI journey isn't new. For many, of course, AI in the greater population, the broader population, is something that feels like it kind of emerged just in recent years. It's nearly 8 years ago that Bank of America introduced your AI chatbot, Erica. And since that introduction, there have been, if I have the data correct, about 3 billion interactions with Erica. More than 90% of the bank's 213, 15,000 employees have used it. So remarkable scale we're talking about. If you would take us back 7 or 8 years to the genesis of Erica, and then talk about its evolution, especially as more powerful artificial intelligence could empower her through this process. Talk about its evolution, if you would.
Sure. And the AI journey for us was even pre-Erica, traditional analytical models, character recognition, document processing, fraud. We've been doing analytics-based AI and automation based on analytics for years. The aha we had about 8 years ago, back to listening to what our clients said. We often heard our clients say, it's great you're jamming all these features into your app, but I can't find it, right? I can't find how to reorder a checkbook. I can't find how I can make a billing dispute. And what they would do is saying, because I can't find it, I love your app, but I got to call the call center. I got to walk into a branch. I'd rather not do that. It's more time consuming for me, but I can't find this stuff. So insight number one is it's harder to find things when you're jamming 100 features on a 1-inch screen, a 5-inch screen. The second insight is, in a relatively commodity business, which banking is, customer delight often comes from like insights, things that make you go like, oh, someone's watching over my financials. I didn't know that was happening to me. As you combine those two insights, what we built out in the first generation and subsequent generations is, first, how do we introduce natural language processing so the human could talk in a human language and not have to hunt and peck across multiple menus on the screen to get from one place to the other? I want to order a checkbook is all you need to say, and we'll figure out how to do it. I'd like to go to the branch. I'd like to make an appointment. That's all you got to say. And then we'll figure out where you are, set up the calendar, all that kind of stuff. And this is long before people started using fancy words like agents and agentic and all that kind of stuff, right? And so essentially using natural language lets customers interact with us on their terms. And what it does then is opens the door for demographics that historically we could never get to use the mobile app. So for example, during the pandemic, we found that our boomers and seniors as clients had the highest uptick in adoption of our digital capabilities by percentages. The Gen Zs and millennials always used it, but we suddenly found why. I can give you my mom's example. All she had to do was, she didn't want to go to the branch at that time. There was a pandemic going on, but she was just as happy to open up the phone and say, I want to know if my rent check cleared. And all of a sudden, it's like, this is easy. I don't have to go in there and log in with a password because we had biometric authentication. I don't have to kind of hunt and peck and scroll and do all these things. I just ask. And it just was such a powerful unlock for us. And this is using small language models. This is long before large language models became a thing. We've been doing this, like I said, for a long time. So that was an interesting journey. The second piece of the insights piece is when you start to look at all the amazing data we have from our clients, which they opt us into, right? Things about your transactions, your behavior, and be able to provide valuable insight. And the classic one I always look at is when I was told that my son's gym charged us 3 times in the same month. And it would have taken me a while to maybe find that out. But Erica woke up one morning and said, looks like your gym membership's usually X. It's now 3X. You may want to check into that. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. And so imagine a typical client, whether it be they're living paycheck to paycheck, or even if you have a lot of money, the fact that something is watching on your behalf, looking at your financials and giving you that insight is such a positive interaction. And if you combine those types of things, as I mentioned, we do those surveys every couple of weeks. We look at how many customers give us 9 or 10 out of 10. Our client satisfaction rate has gone from the 50% to the 89% in the last 8 years. And it's all on the back of numerous capabilities, but also things like Erica that makes it easier to get to those capabilities and those insights that make it so much more delightful for you to actually open up your app because something cool could be waiting on the other side.
Great examples all. I want to take a quick step back if I could, Hari, to talk a bit about some of the necessary ingredients and foundational elements that are necessary to breathe life into what you've described and what we will continue to talk about as well. I know, topics like digitization and automation and data strategy, these are important areas to solve in order to ensure that when you're implementing AI, that it is in fact effective and producing the value anticipated. Can you talk a bit about that journey of ensuring that the right foundation was laid such that you could build with greater confidence?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question because the first building block is automation. Because if all I do is understand what you say and then say, I understood what you said, but I can't do anything for you, it doesn't do you any good. And so we've been the automation journey of like, how do I actually make a payment using a mobile app, using authentication, understanding from and to pairs, having payment rails cleared up so you can actually move money from system to system in a seamless fashion. All the things we do with things like Erica work because underneath it is an automation layer. And wherever possible, we do straight through processing. So you don't have to have a human just taking an incoming request and just running around like crazy. Now, sometimes we do have a thing where you have a request that is, low volume, low intensity. You still want to get it into the system using sort of a mobile app and AI, but maybe there's some work. But most of the time, it starts with a building block of automation. To do the automation, though, you need data. You need data across channels, across products. You have to treat the customer as a single whole. You can't just say this is a credit card life. This is my deposit life. This is my mortgage life. This is my mobile life. This is my call center life. Peter is Peter. It doesn't matter which channel you're coming from, which segment you're coming from, which product you're interacting with this. You have to bring the data together because you can't have insights if you don't have all the data together. Forget about insights. Even if I want to do fraud well, if I don't understand what your behaviors are across those different channels, it's very difficult to kind of have a good picture. And then what I do is either I block you too aggressively because I just don't know, so I'm going to block you, or I don't know enough, so I'm going to let you through and now fraud happens, right? So data becomes a very important building block. And the third building block, which has gotten easier with large language models, but if you rewind the clock 8 years ago, there weren't really easy to use language models out there. So the idea of saying, I am talking in a human language, can you translate that into a banking ontology so I can figure out what is it that I'm trying to do? It's much easier to start from scratch today than it was 8 years ago, although we've learned a lot in that journey. So we had to start with some open source natural language models. We worked with them. We benchmarked a few. We wanted to buy something. We said, we're happy to buy it, but there was no commodity product out there. So we learned about linguistics. We learned about understanding human language. We learned about taxonomies of mapping language to banking terms. Those were the third building block. So if I look at it sort of like an automation layer, there's a data analytics layer, and then there's sort of a content and natural language layer, which of course now has kind of blossomed and is up to an exponential rise with all the innovations going on with large language models.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. I want to also ask about how you have made your workforce AI ready. How have you thought about training, first and foremost, of course, the team that is under you, but given the data I mentioned before and the broad adoption, technologists and non-technologists alike across Bank of America, how have you thought about the broader training of the workforce to ensure that they can take advantage of what you've described?
Yeah, look, one of the things we did almost 3 years ago, which I think was very, in hindsight, worked out really well, is we wanted to make sure senior management teams at the bank, all the way from our CEO down, had a pretty good understanding of the art of the possible. This is when OpenAI came out, yet, the first iteration, like, oh my gosh, we've discovered fire kind of thing, right? We wanted to make sure everybody knew both the art of the possible, the good of it, because eventually we wanted to brainstorm at a business level, what does it mean for us? But just as importantly, the risks of it. This concept, 4 years ago, the word hallucination meant something very different to people, right? Bias, hallucination, all these constructs are very different. With AI, they mean different things. So we spent a lot of time creating a package to educate our senior leadership team on AI. The art of the possible, how does it work? Not at the weedy neural networks level, but just like, what goes into it, how does it work, the benefits that can come out of it, and then some of the trade-offs. So that's something we started a while back. What we also are doing as part of something we call the Academy. Within our HR teams, we run a group called the Academy. The Academy is responsible for educating our workforce on many topics. It's compliance topics, emergent topics. If you're a technologist, if you want to learn Python, if you want to learn about being a cloud engineer, we have topics across many things. You can imagine we use that framework now to create an AI curriculum. I actually had the privilege of doing an introduction to AI for the masses kickoff a couple of weeks back, which was, again, as we reinvigorate some of the work around prompt engineering and prompt tuning, we're just continually using the Academy as a force to educate all of our teammates. So we have curriculum, we have around responsible use of AI, prompt engineering, advanced prompt engineering. There's a whole collection of coursework. And the idea is to expose as many people to this content so they can become better users of the platforms.
Very, very interesting. I wanted to also ask you a little bit about the expansion of some of the bots. We talked about Erica. You now have, for instance, in your Merrill Lynch business, an Ask Merrill solution. You've got in your B of A private bank, Ask Private Bank as well. Talk a bit about how the use, presumably the use case of Erica and its expansion and its success has led to other bots being introduced for more specific use cases, such as the ones I've mentioned.
Yeah, everything you mentioned so far actually is still in the evolution into the large language model space. So we built Ask Merrill a couple of years after Erica. And the aha there for us is we had teammates who used to go in every day when they get a call from a client on the high net worth side, and they had to go through a ton of policy documents. They had to go search, they had to pick stuff, they had to say like, oh, how do I do a trust in Delaware? And they'd have to go look at 6 different PDFs and try to figure it out. We said, well, why couldn't we actually do something with natural language to actually do content curation, have the AI actually sort of index the data and bring forth an interface where you can easily just ask the question, how do I set up a trust in Delaware? And out comes a curated response that uses some of the natural language search. We've got a lot of success with that, replicating that chatbot interface into associate teammate applications, where the problem statement is a lot of stuff out there is in PDFs, in Word documents, it's 4 different places, and people take, 15, 20 minutes to answer a question. Gee, wouldn't it be great if I could just bring that into an ecosystem and have the chatbot help me answer those questions? So we've had a number of those use cases, and they've been very effective and successful. And with the large language models now, we're now taking to the next step, with the ability for us to do even more in terms of more documents, more ascribing back to the source. All kinds of interesting stuff is being unlocked as we roll out the next set of these applications.
And I know, Hari, you preach using the right tool for the right purpose. Describe a bit the method you use to align purposes and tools.
Yeah, a very timely question. And I sort of, we dabbled on this construct of agents, for example, right? Like, and people get excited about like, there's a solution. Is it agentic? And somehow if it's agentic, it's cool. And if it's not agentic, it's not cool. I mean, the reality is there are many problems that can be solved just as well with traditional declarative ways in which you do things. If I gave you a math problem and said, what's 3 + 2? You don't need a big large language model to give me the answer to that. Similarly, for example, there are many use cases where someone will come to me and say, wouldn't it be awesome if instead of writing these rules in this rules engine, I could just give it a procedure manual and have the AI naturally figure out how to route this next request? Well, my question there would be is you could do that, but first of all, the rules will take you a little bit of investment, but it's 100% predictable, right? If someone comes in with a certain thing, you're always going to do the right thing. On the other side, you have something that's going to be probabilistic to start with. If it's something you're doing that has to do with bias and you have to worry about demographic bias, you have to worry about regulatory impact, why would you want to use something that's going to have probabilistic outcome when you could just as easily use something that's deterministic fully? That's an example of where people are getting so excited about this, like, let's throw everything into the agent mix and not asking the question, do I need probabilistic outcomes, which for many cases is awesome, but for many cases it isn't. And you're far better off understanding how to do this. The second piece is when it comes to fulfilling the request, everybody wants to go 100% automation. And that's great as long as it's going to be right 100% of the time. But in some cases, getting 90% automation with 10% human in the loop could be a better outcome because now you can safeguard against some of the risks that are out there. So it's just this constant asking yourself the question, am I trying to solve the client problem or am I trying to build some shiny technology? And I think the more you lean towards how do I solve the client problem responsibly, the higher the probability you get to an outcome that is much more grounded on using the right tool for the right purpose versus getting caught up in using shiny objects when you don't need to.
Which has presumably the benefit also of ensuring you're not overspending or over-engineering on
Great point.
unnecessary features, right?
I mean, for example, the amount of reasoning tokens you have to use to have that probabilistic thing churn away when you've got a rules engine that has 6 rules in it to churn through a simple request. Like it sounds cool that you're doing it using some large language model, but you're racking up the costs out there versus having something simple. You're absolutely right. It's a much more responsible way to do it.
Yeah. I mentioned at the outset the scale of the organization that you help lead. And obviously, as a result of that, that means that as you think about innovating, you need to develop new ideas that are going to move the needle on a $192 billion revenue organization as of last year, for example. How do you think about the process that you use that I'm sure encourages experimentation and proofs of concept and so on, while also ensuring that you are placing the right bets on those things that ultimately will move the needle on such a large, consequential organization?
In the AI space specifically, we've kind of had to go a little slow to go fast, to be perfectly candid. We made a bet to say we don't want to do thousands of proof of concepts right out the gate. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the technology is evolving so quickly that you could just as easily end up with sort of, if I started a development 2 years ago, I would have built 2 platforms that at this point are obsolete. Like the context windows are much bigger. There's things that you get out of the box with these foundation models I'd have had to build 2 years ago. And so what we did instead is saying, let's do a finite set of proof of concepts. We did about 15 to start with, became 25, then became 45. And now we're at a point where we said, like, hold on, we now know how this stuff works. We actually have commercialized a whole bunch of them, and therefore we can go faster now. But we did take a little bit of a go slow to go fast because we wanted to make sure that we had the right governance models in place, that we had the right ROI constructs in place. Go back to your cost point. It's so easy for someone to say, hey, here's a cool idea. It demos amazingly well. It's going to cost a gazillion, and it's going to save 3 minutes of someone's time every 4th week. Is that what you want to make a bet on? And the reality is it's not going to help the bottom line. It's not going to help your revenue. It's not going to help your expenses. So having some maturity around understanding when you come with an idea, you should be thinking about like either an expense save. I'm going to actually take out a lot of costs because we have contract resources that do a bunch of things and now I don't have to do that work anymore. Could be language translation as an example, right? Like we may have to, or it could be like I can get a lot more revenue because instead of a banker only covering 20 clients, the automation of the pitch book creation, the automation of the meeting prep can now let a single banker cover 40 clients. And now imagine the revenue production that follows on there. So in some ways, I think our journey initially, now typically the history we've had is once we get that framework lined up, then we empower each line of business with teammates who essentially have the ability to rapidly iterate, ideate, put some ideas in the hopper, get it prioritized, and then create a set of frameworks that let them get to market fast and furious. So it's a bit of a mixed bag because we want to make sure we get it right first. And then the goal is to unleash it so it can get to the masses faster.
Yeah. You mentioned that you want to be sure that the impulse isn't just to use the most sophisticated solution because one can, especially if the opportunities don't require it. What are the opportunities that you find to be most exciting that do have the application of Agentic AI, for example, as one of the leading edge versions of what we're talking about?
There are lots of great examples. I look at software development. Let's start in my own shop as a technology team. We write software all the time. That's what we do. We have to modernize a lot of systems. In the past, it's been difficult to take a look at some code that was written in a legacy language and to rewrite it in a modern language. And that holds back in some ways the modernization efforts. We've got agents right now we're trying out that literally take the old code, you give it some prompts that are specific to where you want your target state architecture to be, and reverse engineer both the logic and then subsequently even create a first draft of something that could be a shell of the future code. You can then incorporate in there saying, give me all the test cases that go along with this. So I can put testing into the process. So even in our own shop, like the ability to use agents, software agents, to be able to take in inputs such as existing code, take in inputs such as requirements, and to generate either requirements, more requirements, or actual software and test cases is very powerful. And we're seeing a very positive impact on that. And on the business side of it, I think, again, you have to look at your individual process and workflow. There's no magic bullet, right? There are certain processes and workflows where you can actually afford to be wrong. I'll give you an example. If I have an incoming call coming in, and if I want to judge based on the first 10 things you say, what you're calling me about, what's the worst thing that happens if I get it wrong? I'll route you to some, let's just say 90% of the time I get it right, and 10% of the time I get it wrong. 10% of the time you're like, nah, that's not what I want. Can you get, that's not no harm, no foul, right? 90% you're happy, 10% you'll just reroute me and off you go. That's where we can go wrong. There's a bunch of use cases like saying, I want to see if Peter should be approved for this loan or not. Just have an agent make that decision. I don't want to be 90% right. I can't afford to be 10% wrong. And so in that use case, but even there's complex. Within that, there's workflows, document gathering. We can certainly do some agents that do document gathering. Hey, I'm going to go, rather than get Peter's W-2 and da-da-da-da-da, we have agents that can go fetch and get these documents together. Now, a human in the loop would look at it and go, hang on for a second, agent, you missed these two documents. That's the safeguard, right? That's the guardrail. I still can get the best of both worlds. So you kind of have to understand your process. You have to understand your outcome. You have to understand your risk appetite. And then based on that, figure out how you take all these cool tools. And they're all cool. They're all awesome. It's just that when you start applying the wrong thing to the wrong place is when you get into trouble. As long as you understand your process, your tools, you bring it together, you get some really amazing outcomes and some exciting stuff out there for that.
How do you think about the buy build spectrum for AI, and how have you curated your ecosystem of partners in those instances where you've chosen to buy?
Yeah, look, I think our strategy actually is, we call it a 3-layer stack. The lowest layer is just productivity software that all employees will get. Help write an email, put a PowerPoint presentation together, do me a little research, nothing that's business context. And that's kind of, a lot of it becomes commodity pretty quickly. Right? There's no value in me building that from scratch. You then have a sort of persona-driven work, which is where you have like certain roles. I said software development. There's companies that are specializing in like really good software development coding tools. There are CRM platforms that are very much specialized. Anybody who's doing CRM is going to have an AI component to it. You have ITSM, service management. So those are all persona-driven things that it would be shame of you to kind of go rebuild all that stuff. What you want to offer there is a framework for guardrails, a framework for identity, so they can conform to your framework, but leverage the heck out of the billions of dollars they're going to invest in that. So buy the heck out of that layer to the stack. But then when it comes to the complex, how do we stitch innovative things together? How do we put our IP into the mix? How do we orchestrate a workflow? How do you get the human in the loop the most effective fashion? All that stuff is where we would then build. So it's not an either or, it's actually probably a combination of both. And that's true with all of our digital development to date as well, to some extent.
Mm-hmm. There are a few different camps that I've seen emerge around thinking about the ROI associated to AI. There are those who say, look, it's like electricity. Eventually, in the not too distant future, it's going to be such a given across all that we do. Let's not force this upon the decisions associated with this such that we're going to stunt our own growth to something that's inevitable. Others will say, look, there's a lot of time and treasure being put to this. We need to make sure that there's actual value on the other end of this. I wonder, if that's broadly sort of the continuum. Where do you sit on this, and how do you think about the necessity or not of proving ROI of the investments you're making?
Well, back to that 3-layer stack I mentioned, we haven't sort of gone out and said, let's go try to assess productivity at that core employee productivity layer, because now you got to deal with, like, I saved 3 minutes writing an email here. I saved 2 minutes in doing research there. So we said, look, for the core commodity for the company, we're going to not go down this whole ROI craziness. Like, that's about like productivity. We'll figure it out over time. At some point, it'll make you more productive and off you go. When it gets to the more complex stuff, I think that's where you got to be careful that you don't sort of launch 1,000 ships all going off in the, I need lots of GPUs and I need a lot of, token capacity, all that stuff. You need to have like some sense of, why would I build this entire end-to-end workflow and incorporate agents within it? What's the value prop? Why would I do that? Because there's investment needed. You got to write software. You got to call models, you got to test it, you got to build guardrails, you got to do all this stuff. So we do look at sort of the more level 3, which is where you get to the more complex, bespoke, we're solving business process optimization problems. That's where we look at ROI. And the second reason we look at that is because it's a chance to take a step back and ask the question, should this process really still be done the same way today as it was done 20 years ago when it was put in? Because the reality of what you'll see is many processes are done the same way today they were 20 years ago. If all you do is parachute in a new tool, throw a mobile app, AI, and say, let's make that same thing work, it's suboptimal. I mean, yes, could you get some juice out of it? Sure. But wouldn't it be better to say, hang on for a second, this process costs me X every year. I'm going to first dismantle it. I'm going to ask the question, why do I have steps 6, 7, 8, and 14? Do I need it anymore? Laws have changed, rules have changed, things have changed. Let's unwind those. Does step 2 need to be as complex as it needs to be? Maybe not so much. You do that, now you can have something and say, now let me inject AI and development into it. It gives you the discipline to actually look at your processes so you can have the right conversation as to how do you modernize the end-to-end process going forward.
I wonder, as we talk about as important and it seems almost all-inclusive trends such as artificial intelligence, are there others that particularly excite you, Hari, as you look to the future? What else is kind of making its way onto your roadmap that you think might be consequential in the months or years ahead?
Well, I think good old-fashioned automation. There's so much we do every single day. I'm sure we look at and go like, gee, why do I have to do these 3 steps in some workflow or process, either in our personal life or our professional lives, right? Like there's so much good old-fashioned automation that still remains to be there in the first place. I think personalization, like so much of what we do every day, we deal with things that are given to us as if we're just one of the billion people wandering the earth, which we are. But wouldn't it be great if in everything I do, and yes, AI could play a role in it, but some of it's traditional data, traditional analytics, traditional insights, but being able to sort of understand through exceptions, how do you process your day more efficiently and effectively? So I think good old-fashioned automation, good old-fashioned data integration, analytics, in addition to AI, I think all those things have a huge role to play in all the good work up ahead.
As you think about automation and AI, Hari, I'm wondering how has your own workflow changed in recent months or years? How do you think about the application of this in ways that allow you to free up some of your time or perhaps elevate the point at which you are personally engaging in a decision to be made or an opportunity to pursue?
The thing that I found most helpful is this idea of real-time upskilling. Like I'll be in a meeting. I was in a meeting with our board last week, and there was a conversation about a new financial product that was being described. I had no idea what the product was, and the gentleman was about to start presenting it. And I would not have followed the 1 hour conversation, except I went into my favorite chatbot and said, like, hey, can you explain this construct to me in 5 bullets? And out came a really good, concise 5 bullets. Got it. And as the presentation started, I was 500% more engaged, knew what the presentation was about, could ask some thoughtful questions, and could actually get something like meaningful out of it to go execute against. This whole idea that every time we have a meeting, conversation, often things come our way that we don't fully appreciate and understand. But it takes too much time to go understand it. This whole just-in-time reskilling. Someone just mentioned FFIEC guideline 1432 in a meeting. Like real quick, what does it even mean? They're talking about identity access. Let me kind of opine on my point of view. So I think it's just amazing how easy it is for us to now learn. Now you don't want to make it your next scroll up kind of thing. It can't be like a trick, but it is an important asset in your arsenal to keep yourself constantly upskilled, in my view, on a day-to-day basis, day-to-day, hour-to-hour. So easy to just kind of pick up new concepts as you go along.
Yeah, great suggestions and applications in the way you operate. Thank you for sharing that, Hari. I wonder, before I let you go, anything you've recently read, watched, and or listened to that you'd recommend to peers?
Oh, one of the things I am a buff of is I like the notion of history, philosophy, evolution, and technology and science all coming together. It's sort of like one of those things where like I play a closet philosopher in my personal life. And so Yuval Noah Harari, who writes some very interesting books. I read Sapiens and Homo Deus in the past, but he wrote a recent book called Nexus, which was really about the intersectionality between how information technology has pervaded all the way in society from thousands of years ago when humans started to communicate to today's day and age with the modern age of AI, both in terms of the benefits and how it unites society, and just as importantly, how it has created sort of threats and risks of how we communicate both actual news and fake news. All that stuff is fascinating to see what came before us and how technology shapes what's coming up on us. So I thought that was a fascinating book, and I enjoyed reading it.
I agree. Gosh, I really enjoyed Nexus as well. It's a great suggestion, Hari. And Hari, thank you so much, more generally speaking, for a phenomenal conversation, talking about the remarkable work that you and your team are doing to impact your own operation within Bank of America, but very importantly, the wide array of customers that you have with an institution like yours. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about what the team is currently doing, but also what the future holds as well. It's been a great conversation.
Great. Thank you for having me.